The sandy road along the water's edge stretched like a bright string, flanked by rustling reeds and thin rows of casuarinas. The sea breeze blew tirelessly, seeping through every strand of clothing, every strand of hair, every barely formed thought. In front, a row of abandoned warehouses lay still like beached whales, their metal shells rusted, their sliding doors broken, their floors covered with sand piled into small mounds. No one had lived here for long, only the waves, salt and wind. Travelers who never stopped came every day. Mira stopped in front of the warped sliding door of the third warehouse from the dock. She was 31 years old, her face much thinner after the divorce. Her hands tightly held a thin backpack. Inside were a few sets of clothes, a blanket, some old dishes, and a small notebook. Leo, a 5-year-old boy, stood close, holding a paper boat. "Mom, is this our house?" Mira leaned down and kissed her son's tangled, salt-scented hair. "Yes, this is our home, starting today." They left their cruel marriage empty-handed. Rumors clung to them like salt to a metal wall, persistent, salty, and stinging. Mira had chosen this place, an abandoned boat shed, not because it was livable, but because it was honest. It didn't pretend to be warm. It was rusty and windy, just like what she had in mind. But here, she could start over without anyone's permission. She tried the sliding door. The dry wheel screeched like a knife, then stopped because of sand stuck in the groove. Mira took a deep breath, bent down and used her hands to push the sand aside. Thick, soft clumps. Leo blew on it, and the sand turned into fine dust that sparkled in the sun. She found the bottle of grease in her small tool bag, dipped it in the axle, and rolled it back and forth several times. The door creaked open, then opened wide enough for them to get in. The inside was dark. The smell of salt, metal, and long-dried fish wafted in. The walls were speckled with white spots from crystallized salt, and the floor was covered with a thick layer of sand like a rough carpet. In one corner, there was a cracked wooden boat frame. Next to it were a few warped planks. On the ceiling, a long gap revealed a strip of blue sky. The wind passed through the gap, making a long whistle. Leo timidly said, "The wind is singing, Mom." Mira nodded, took off her backpack, pulled out an old scarf to tie her hair, and rolled up her sleeves. "Let's give the wind a roof to sing softly, okay?" The boy smiled, his eyes bright. The first afternoon, they opened the door wide to let the sunlight in. Mira mixed a bucket of warm water with white vinegar, added a little salt, and lemon slices she got from the stall at the wharf. She dipped a rag and started wiping the walls from top to bottom. After just a few strokes, the salt dissolved, revealing the discolored corrugated iron. The smell of lemon and vinegar mixed with the smell of the sea, making the air less acrid. Leo pulled a small broom, swept the sand into a corner, and while sweeping, drew a boat shape. Sand clung to his feet, but the boy didn't mind. Mira smiled, remembering the last time he noticed such simple joy. It had been a long time. They worked until the sun was golden. The old fisherman at the end of the wharf leisurely walked by. His hair was as white as foam. His left eye was as dull as a shell. People called him Mr. Grey. He stopped in front of the warehouse door, looked at the mother and son for a while, and then nodded slightly. "If you want a house by the sea breeze, you have to know how to make friends with salt." His voice was as deep as stone. Mira wiped her sweat, smiled, and greeted. "My name is Mira. This is your son, Leo." The old man looked at the boy, snorted happily. "The little one is like a flying fish, bright eyes, very fast. Tomorrow I will show him bait." He put a bundle of old rope on the floor. "To tie the door temporarily, tonight the wind will change direction." The first night, the wind howled strongly. Mira tied the door diagonally with rope and propped it up inside. She spread a blanket on the corner of the floor that had been swept clean of sand and held Leo close to her heart. The wind blew in gusts, and the sand outside whipped against the door. "Mom, is the wind angry?" "No. The wind is testing to see if our house will stand." She also said those words to herself. In the darkness, she thought of the villagers' whispers. Those who leave their husbands empty-handed. What do women know about repairing warehouses? The wind whistled through the cracks of the door like whispers. Mira squeezed her son's hand tighter. "Tomorrow we'll start painting it against salt," she whispered, "and build the stove high enough so the salt can't get in." The next morning, the sun shone through the gaps in the roof in thin streaks of light. Mira folded the blanket and asked Leo to count the buckets of water. Together, mother and daughter dragged large buckets of water to the shore, scooped up seawater, then poured some out, mixed it with clean vinegar, and carried it back to rinse it on the wall to dissolve the crystallized salt again. The metal surface was wet and shiny. She used a hard bristled brush to scrub the joints and nail trays thoroughly. The scrubbing sound was steady, each stroke a whisper. Do it again, do it again. At noon, 3 young men from the village stopped by. They were Mr. Gray's friends, Finn, Luke, too, tanned, broad-shouldered and laughing. We came to help when you called. Mira was a little embarrassed. You can only buy lunch and some paint? Finn waved his hand. Never mind, we're glad to have someone staying in this warehouse. It's less quiet at night. They started to join the old wooden bars into a windbreak frame made of wooden slats, erected diagonally in front of the main door. The sea breeze is so strong that it can tire the house. Let's make it bend a little. With the force of cutting the bar, 2 drilled holes to screw in. The sound of the drill and saw combined with the sound of the waves to create a cheerful melody. Mira took the opportunity to grind the large rust spot on the west wall. She put on her glasses and turned on the grinder. Tiny sparks flew out like stardust in the daytime. When the rust layer was gone, she wiped it dry, blew off the dust, applied a very thin layer of marine epoxy primer, waited for it to dry, then applied a second layer of smoky grey paint. As the paint covered the surface, it was as if it was covered smooth, tight and secure. She moved on to the metal rails of the sliding door, sanded clean, dried, applied anti-rust paint, then applied salt-resistant grease to the bearings. The sliding door gradually glided smoothly, the first sharp screech turning into a rustling sound, as smooth as a boat sliding on the waves. Leo followed Mr. Gray to the beach and picked up young sea morning glory plants. Plant sea morning glory close to the edge of the sand. Its roots hold the soil, and the purple flowers look pleasing to the eye, he said. Leo, eyes lit up when he saw the morning glory blooming like little stars. Returning, he planted each sapling along the base of the wooden slats. Mira dug a hole deep enough and sprinkled it with a little fresh water. The young men brought the young casuarinas, who planted them diagonally, making a living windbreak. Each tree was tied with soft rope to prevent breakage, and its base was covered with straw to keep it moist. One more windy season, and it will stand as steady as a mast, Finn said, wiping his sweat. In the afternoon, Mira set up a temporary stainless steel stove from some old panels bought cheaply at the scrap market. She measured the width, cut stainless steel legs, and raised the stovetop high off the floor so that salt and moisture wouldn't corrode it. On the kitchen wall, she covered it with the washable plastic panels, smooth, easy to wipe, and odor-free. The new stove was simple and clean, standing there like a promise of a hot meal every night. She boiled a pot of fish porridge with ginger, sharing a portion with Mr. Gray and the boys. They slurped and laughed, their laughter making the warehouse feel a little more spacious. The second night was less noisy. Mira's clear plastic windbreak curtains hung inside the door. Soft and tight curtains swayed in the wind, making a sound like the gentle lifting of sails. Leo marked each day with a pencil line on the post. Day 1, the door is no longer stuck. Day 2, the stove has a light. The boy read aloud, proudly. The next morning, they washed the salt one last time, sprayed the walls with clean water, and left them to dry in the sun. Light flooded into corners that had never seen sunlight before. Mira switched to a bright epoxy coating for all the treated metal. Her hands trembled with fatigue, but the paint was even. Finn climbed the ladder to check the new leaf catchers installed along the roof. 2 attached the trash screen to the exhaust pipe. Luke tightened the air vents. Mr. Gray rubbed fish oil on a few wooden hinges and smiled. At sea, everything needs a little grease, just like people need a little love. At noon, Mira and Leo cleaned the sliding panels. She drew a plan for the door in chalk. Drill holes to install handles on both ends. Install a lock to prevent wind gusts. When she was done, she went back inside to temporarily install usable wooden planks on a small raised floor for the mother and son to sleep on, avoiding moisture. Leo spread out a mat, placed a paper boat on the headboard, and whispered, "Our new house has a dock, Mom." That afternoon, there were more people coming and going in the village. Curious eyes stopped at the door. Some looked pityingly, some shrugged, some whispered. Mira listened, but did not force it on herself. She focused on her hands, scrubbing, painting, screwing, wiping. Gossip was like the wind. If the house was airtight enough, it would just glide over the walls. If she was careless, it would blow in and make her cold. She chose to patch the gap by being diligent and kind. On the fourth day, Mira devoted herself to the sliding door. She removed the old wheel, dipped it in oil, and turned it until it was smooth. She rubbed the rails with sandpaper, scraped off the salt crystals stuck in the grooves, sprayed a vinegar water solution to dissolve the salt, wiped them dry, then applied a thin layer of lithium grease. She installed rubber gaskets along the edge of the door to prevent the wind from whistling. When she tried pushing it, the door slid smoothly, like the sound of receding waves. Mira burst out laughing, a rare laugh since leaving. Leo clapped his hands. Mr. Gray nodded from afar, dropped the net in his hand to the ground, and called out, "It runs smoothly like a newly launched boat." The electricity was the next thing. Finn knew the electrician in the village. He came, installed anti-salt lamps, and neatly wired them on a high wooden shelf. Along the entrance, Mira installed small solar lights, each one like a separate star, turning on automatically at night and collecting sunlight during the day. Leo tried each one, excited. "Our star is lit by solar power!" "Yes," Mira said. "Light without anyone turning it on for me." They spent a quiet afternoon making stainless steel shelves for the kitchen. A single-piece stovetop, rounded corners, and non-slip rubber feet. The wall around the stove continued to be covered with washable plastic. Mira tried wiping a line. The faint oil stain disappeared immediately. This stove doesn't retain odors for long. I'm not afraid of a cooking fish. Leo used a pen to draw a smiling fish on a piece of scrap. Mira stuck it next to the shelf like a small mascot. The story of planting windbreak trees continued on the 5th day. In addition to the sea spinach, they also planted willows with few leaves, tolerant to salt. Mr. Gray showed Leo how to anchor the trees with 3 ropes tied in 3 directions, so that when the wind blew, the trees would bend instead of break. The same goes for people, he said. Don't be too stiff and break. Mira listened, raising her head. That sentence was like a nail tapping lightly on her heart. Neat and deep. In the afternoon, Mira and Tu stretched thick, transparent plastic curtains in front of the large opening, overlapping. 2 layers in a staggered pattern, so that even if the wind blew, it would be gentle. Inside, Mira hung an extra piece of coarse cloth curtain to warm her eyes. She spread a jute mat on the raised floor, placed 2 old pillows wrapped in clean burlap. The warehouse gradually became less like a warehouse. On the 5th night, the frost was thick. The energy stars outside gradually faded, and then went out. Inside, the anti-humidity lamp cast a warm yellow light on the stainless steel surface, sparkling like a ship's kitchen. Leo hugged his pillow, snoring softly. Mira sat writing in a small notebook. Day 5. The wall is less salty. The door is smooth. The wind is less sharp. Can cook sour soup without the smell lingering too long. The villagers still say it, but the sound of my hands gradually drowns it out. On the 6th morning, the weather changed. The clouds gathered offshore, the horizon dark as ink. Mr. Gray passed by, nodding into the distance. Just a little rain and wind, but enough to test the house. Mira checked the leaf troughs, the screen, the epoxy paint joints, added more weight to the sensitive areas, tightened the door gaskets. She moved the easily flying objects inside, tied the heavy objects. Leo trotted over, reminding his mother, don't forget the paper boat. At noon, the wind suddenly changed direction, blowing straight into the warehouse. The wooden slats in front broke at the corners. The wind blew to both sides, leaving only a steady whistling sound. The rain beat against the door, pattering. Inside, Mira stood in the middle of the house, looking up at the ceiling. There were no more leaks in the patches she had patched. There was only the sound of rain hitting the iron like a small rhythmic drum set. The plastic curtains shook, but did not tear. The sliding door was closed tightly. The gasket was tight. The raised floor was dry. The stainless steel kitchen was bright. The walls were clean. Leo laughed out loud, his eyes sparkling. "Mum, we beat the wind." Mira laughed, this time clearly, long and clear like the sound of a boat whistle in the distance. She held her child, turning around in the middle of the house that a few days ago was just an empty metal belly. "Yes, we beat the wind." She spoke slowly, feeling each word dissolve into the sound of the rain. Outside, the rain passed like a polite traveller, knocking on the door to see if anyone was home, and then retreating when he knew the owner had finished setting up the roof. Late afternoon, the clouds thinned, the sky washed clean. The smell of grilled fish from the charcoal stove Mr. Gray brought was fragrant. The 3 village boys returned, sat on the floor, holding bowls, smiling endlessly. "Mira, tomorrow we will help you build a light mezzanine for you, to put things up high to avoid humidity." Mira nodded, her eyes grateful. "I still have an old fire extinguisher to keep the stove safe," Thin added. Tu pulled out a bar of fragrant foam soap from his pocket. Let Leo wash his hands after playing in the sand. The whole family laughed. That night, the solar lights along the entrance were on evenly. The sea breeze had changed to a deep tone. Mira made a cup of ginger tea, sat on the raised floor watching her child sleep. She reached out to touch the newly painted wall. Cool, dry, free of salt. Inside her, a space opened up, not because it was empty, but because it had enough room for peaceful walking. In the following days, the work turned to fine-tuning. The mezzanine was built with lightweight steel and composite boards, and a small ladder was neatly placed in the corner. Mira arranged things high up, allowing air to flow through the floor. She hung some rough fabric as soft patches for the eyes, and sewed a large mesh bag to store Leo's toys. She painted a light blue line along the wall like a wave and pasted small photos on it. Leo smiling while planting morning glory. Mr. Gray pulling the net, 3 boys carrying a stainless steel shelf. Mira scrubbing the wall in the sun. The photos warmed the house, like a stove adding fire to a stove. The first Sunday morning, the villagers were less curious. A woman selling orange cakes passed by and offered Mira some sesame cakes. "Are you staying?" "Yes, staying," Mira answered softly. She let the old gossips drift away with the wind. She knew she didn't need to prove anything to anyone but Leo, the house, and herself. That evening, Mira cooked fish noodles. Leo sat on a small chair and told the story of the paper boat. "I'll name it Little Star, because at night our house has many stars on the ground." He pointed to the solar lights outside. Mira scooped more noodles into a small bowl. The scent of onions, pepper, and ginger mixed together, fragrant. The stainless steel stove reflected the light like water. The sound of the sea outside drifted in softly. The wind no longer made the sound of knives cutting. It was like the steady breathing of someone sleeping soundly. One morning, Mr. Gray took Leo to the shore and taught him how to tie a noose, a butterfly, and a flat knot. Knots are like decisions. If tied correctly, no matter what the wind is like, they won't come loose. He smiled. Mira watched from afar, her heart sinking, knowing her son was learning things that were not written in books. To stand firm, to bend, and not break. And then, the monsoon season really came. The news said a small storm was passing offshore. The village tied up the boats, pulled the nets ashore, and tied everything down. Mira checked everything she had done. Tight epoxy paint, sturdy wooden slats, unbroken plastic curtains, tight gaskets, pine needle trays, clean stove, sturdy shelves, and a safe mezzanine. She unplugged the extra power outlet, turned off the outside lights, leaving only a small yellow light on. Mr. Gray leaned over and reminded her, "If the water rises, remember to push sand inside, not outside, or it will push back." Mira nodded and hugged him. "Thank you." The wind came with a long howl. The wooden slats in front vibrated like strings. The plastic curtains fluttered. The sliding door made a deep sound and then stopped. The rain lashed heavily. The seawater carried salt and splashed against the warehouse surface. Meeting the paint, it slid away. Mira and Leo sat on the raised floor, hugging each other, counting. 1, 2, 3. The wind sound decreased by a notch, then rose again, then fell again. The yellow light in the house did not flicker. The stainless steel stove was waterproof. The wall paneling was not wet. The floor was dry. Everything stood firm, as if the house and the wind had just signed a peace treaty. When the eye of the storm had passed, the wind gradually subsided. A fine rain still fell. Leo jumped down and ran to the door. "Mum, we beat the wind again." Mira laughed, hugged her child, and spun around again amid the smell of clean metal, dry wood, wet salt, and ginger tea. Outside, the sky was a patch of blue. Mr. Grey stood far away, giving a thumbs up. 3 village boys howled long as if to wake up fish. In the afternoon, they cleaned the yard, dug the sand back into place, put the tilted casuarina trees back in place, wedged the soil and tied the ropes. Mira washed the plastic curtains, dried them, checked the door rails again, and added a thin layer of salt-resistant grease. She collected the floating plastic trash into bags and sorted them. Leo picked up beautiful shells and strung them into wind chimes to hang in the corner of the kitchen. When the wind was light, the chimes rang ting, ting, clear, like the laughter of a child. At night, the solar lights along the entrance were on again. The warehouse had become a home. Mira poured tea into 2 old porcelain cups, handed one to Mr. Grey. He sat on the doorstep, took a sip, and let out a satisfied sigh. "I told you, if you want a house by the sea breeze, you have to know how to make friends with salt. You can make friends." Mira smiled, looking at him, looking at Leo dozing off next to a bowl of milk. She felt that here, no one could take away from her the ability to rebuild everything with her own hands, by the persistent repetition of each small movement. The next morning, the sky was as clear as a mirror. Mira opened the door. It slid smoothly. The wind blew in gently. The smell of sea spinach and casuarina resin was as fragrant as a sun-dried pillow. She placed a plate of cakes, some slices of sweet-simmered dried fish, and a pot of tea on the table. She wrote in the notebook, Day 14. The storm passed. The house was dry. Leo smiled. I understood that divorce took away my assets, my name, the things that people said were necessary. But it did not take away my hands, my breath, my belief that doing a little more each day was enough. No one could take away my ability to rebuild. She closed the notebook and put it on the shelf. Sunlight filtered through the plastic curtain. Water droplets danced on the stainless steel surface like baby fish. She placed her hand on the wall and whispered, not to the wind, but to herself. From now on, the house will stand firm, and so will I. Outside, the sea breathed. The wind began its never-ending story again. But inside, between the clear plastic curtain, the still-smelling epoxy paint, the clean stainless steel stove, the solar light sleeping during the day after a long night, there was a smile just blooming, simple, quiet, and warm enough for mother and child to go through the new windy season. You may lose your assets in a divorce, but no one can take away your ability to rebuild.